Well, after the disappointment I had with No Peace Without Spain, not really the game necessarily bore my feeling, decided to pull out Successors. Now, I picked this up recently. I played it once many, many years ago when it first came out. This is a new version. Wasn't a great experience for me because it was first time playing with someone who brought the game who didn't know the rules, trying to read them and explain them at the same time. And four of us playing and kind of blundering around, making jokes about 23 billion Greeks or something like that. Anyhow, set it up, and I'll go a little bit through the rules. I can't go in too much depth with them, partially because I still don't have a great grasp on everything here, as usual. But that's usually a good reason to do so. So one of the things that struck me right off the bat was how cool it was that the setup is kind of randomized. This is kind of like Kingmaker or something in this. Oh, here's a pity. I seem to be missing the turn marker. Ouch. I'm hoping I'm not missing anything important. Used game I picked up, I didn't count the counters when it first came. I just gave it a good rating, and it looked like it was all there, and all the cards are there. Okay, so you shuffle together these 8 starting leaders and deal them out to the players, and that works fine in 2 or 4 players and 3 players. They kind of have to play around with it a little bit, and there's a little bit of weirdness there. Okay, so each of the leaders, one of the things that kind of disturbed me was these little stands for the characters. To some extent, they come with all the right colors, sort of. You've got control markers for yellow, black, blue, and red, and we got little plastic stands for each of them. Unfortunately, there's only one black plastic stand, and all the other plastic stands, the rules seem to indicate you don't really worry about that. Well, I do kind of worry about that. I'd like to be able to tell whose pieces are whose by those stands, and my set has the right number of stands. It just doesn't have enough for the black color, and that's kind of a pity. I mainly search for more little black stands. I think I have some in another game that I could swap things out for. Sequence of play. That's a good way to start things. Okay. Turn order play. Whoever has the least victory points gets to decide who goes first, and then we go clockwise from there. And of course, because it's me, we'll make that counterclockwise just to confuse things. But least victory points in this case is going to be the red player, and chances are going last is an advantage in this game. The only question would be if he wanted to get his forces together early. I don't think he can do that, although they are fairly close. The other black player counter is here in the Hellespont. So these are 2 blues, the blacks here, and in Babylonia. Well, actually, I can't just swap them out. I'd have to swap the little markers out, and that's a pain in the butt. Okay, and that may be why it was deemed not worth it, because you'd have to move your markers every game. So that's pretty easy to look at, and I think red is going to make blue the first player in this case. And he's actually got a lot of advantages being kind of close to himself. Of course, he's got red right in the midst of him, and I think there's going to be some fighting because of that. Then you go to the reinforcement phase, and each player gets reinforcements as follows. Basically, only a few people get any. The person who has Macedonia gets 1, And this is loyal Macedonian combat units. We got different kinds of combat units. We got the Macedonians. These are the loyal Macedonians. Let's get that out of the way. This is the Macedonian Royal Army. It will not necessarily fight for you if you have less legitimacy than the other faction. The mercenaries, who are just lesser valued troops than the Macedonians. We got elephants, who are kind of random in battle. There's also some special units here, which include the Silver Shields, which are sort of the elite Macedonians. They don't worry so much about legitimacy. They're affected by the deck. Okay, and this doesn't happen on the first turn. The person with the most legitimacy points also gets a loyal Macedonian unit. And then 2 go to whoever has the most victory points. If people are tied for most victory points, they each get 1. And those, as well as any of your troops that are in the dispersed box, basically get placed in friendly controlled spaces or those with a friendly leader. Spaces on the board, let me explain them briefly. We have minor cities, major cities, and then we have these strong points. And I'm not quite sure what the difference between a strong point and a city that's controlled is. I think it has to do with the strength points that are there, but I haven't really gotten a real grasp on the rules. I'm going to kind of fight my way through as I go, because I read this a while ago and then I reread them and they're just not sticking well. Okay, then we shuffle and deal the Taiki cards. Now, each player gets 5 at the beginning of their turn. And each turn the entire deck is reshuffled. Wow, that's kind of severe. Okay. And then we go to the strategy phase. Well, in the Taiki phase, you play some of them, right? No. The strategy phase, you get to play in your turn each of the following actions. You conduct the surrender segment. This is just basically if you're sitting on a minor city, you get control of it. If you're sitting on a major city, and maybe that's a strong point as well, or an independently controlled space. Those are all the green spaces. Then you have to make a siege roll. And those will be handled here on the siege table. Some cities have a siege modifier. And that'll cause siege points to be gained. If you get enough siege points, the city surrenders to you. And it also can cause losses to you for being outside sieging them. Okay, then we go to the Taiki space phase. And at that point, you must play one Taiki card that's not a surprise card. Now, the cards are kind of weird here. When you play a card, you have a number of different options. And they're kind of spread through the rules and not in the best of manners. The first 3 are these. You can conduct a forced march with an army. And that allows you to move one of your forces the operation number on that card. These cards aren't quite like other CDGs in a lot of ways. You can place control markers, and I believe that's a number equal to the ops number. And you have to put them within range of your own control markers. That's 2 movement points away. They have to be already established, so you can't just chain your way across the board in one play. And you can't go through enemy forces or control markers to do this. All right, and you could also train troops. That costs you 3 points of Taiki cards. Now, if you don't have a 3-point card in your hand, you can kind of accumulate those troops. Okay, I think you marked that here, but I don't rightly remember completely. Placing the CU on the records track, yeah. So you can mark it on here, actually. I'm not sure why it's here. To indicate how many points you've accumulated towards it. It's 3 points to train mercenaries, and it's 7 points to build yourself new loyal Macedonian CUs. Now, these aren't necessarily all Macedonians. They might be Phalangites. There's no real difference. It doesn't really matter where you build them. They're treated the same. Okay. If you don't want to play a card, you can discard it, however. And that's kind of like playing it. In that case, you can upgrade a fleet to its stronger side. If you own a fleet, and some of these people actually do, and I haven't assigned them yet, you can flip it over and make it a more potent fleet. I should assign those. So, for example, the Macedonian fleet is going to be over here. The Egyptian fleet will be in his hands. I don't know who has the Phoenician fleet. It's over here. That nobody owns that. Trying to see if anybody else. Does Cilicia have a fleet? Cilician pirates exist. I think. Crap. But I'm not sure they're there. What are those little white ships? Potential fleet. Yeah, that would it would make sense if there was a little ship there. Let's see, Rhodes has its fleet. Athens has its fleet. Asia Minor has a fleet. I would think that's this one, but it's not clear to me how you get those. So I'm going to have to look that up, who owns what fleets. But rather than do that now, let's see what else you can do when you discard a card. You could bring a major general into play if you've lost one. That's got... Okay, I'm not playing with that option. I'm playing with all the other options, but not that one. I don't like it because it balances the game, and I'm opposed to balance. Okay. Now, otherwise, you can play your Taiki card as an event, in which case the event just takes place. And some of those events can only take place once in the game. There are bonus cards which allow you to use the event and the operations number. The event takes place after you spend your operations number. There are surprise cards which you can play at any time, even in the opponent's turn. And if you don't like, when you play them, you get another draw. If you don't like them, you can just discard them and get another draw. Okay. Then during your turn, you have two options. You can either move, and this is very unlike any other CDG. Instead of just moving a force triggered by an operations card, you just get to move all your forces, or you can build a mercenary. And they label that as being Rule 9.13. Okay, so it doesn't follow the normal rule numbering. So here we go, raising a CU in lieu of movement. Movement is dictated by the different spaces, by the different lines between spaces. The dark lines are normal land paths, they cost 1. Mountain passes and straights are dashed, and they cost 2. And if we can, there's 1. There's also these sea spaces, and there's kind of coastal ones which only cost 1 to move along. But they can be intercepted navally. And then there's the deep sea spaces, which cost 2 to travel. And they can sort of be intercepted. You can't intercept across one of them, but you can intercept someone who's coming into your coastal areas. Okay. Then you have to forage, and at this point you check your stacking versus the forage limit of the space. And I seem to remember all spaces have a 6, but transit points have a 3. And indeed, no, it's all other spaces have 8. And that's how many combat units you can have. Not strength points, combat units. So for example, these are 2 combat units with 4 strength points. This would be 1 with 2. Mercenaries are at 1 for 1. Okay. And then each other player goes. And then we start another round. And remember, you have 5 cards in your hand. So you're going to have 1 card to play in each round. As you play your surprise cards, they get replaced. Now, of course, you could just discard a surprise card instead, but usually you'd want to discard it for a draw at the very least. So you want to use your surprise cards as surprise cards, so you get the ops or event. Then we go to the isolation phase, and at this point, if your control markers are isolated, which is to say they can't trace back, and I believe it's to a major city or a strength point of yours, then they probably disappear or something. Yeah, they just get removed. Okay. And then we go to the end of the turn. Conceivably, you could count victory points at this point, but in actuality, victory points are being tracked at all times, and you win by achieving the correct number of victory points at any time, if that's the type of victory. Basically, there are 2 different types of automatic victory, which are a legitimacy victory. If you hit 18 legitimacy points, you win. Or the automatic victory points victory, which is 23 in this number of players. But that's not the only way to win the game. The game plays over only 5 turns, marked here, and a number of things happen. The first turn, Alexander's body, which is here in Babylon, can't be moved. He's just died, and they have to, like, I don't know, embalm him or something. On the second turn, you can start moving this funeral cart of Alexander's body. And that gives additional prestige to the army that has it. It doesn't actually exist yet, but there's no marker for just the body. We've got one leader dies and another one replaces him here. That's one of the player leaders. Alexander's body rots here. So you only have a couple of turns to get him somewhere. And you want to get him to a major city and bury him. Now you could do that just in Babylonia. And that's worth 2 legitimacy points if you do that. But if you can get him home to Pella, it's worth 10. So there's kind of this desire to get him further. Because remember, legitimacy is one of the ways you can win the game. Okay. So, if the third way to win is if Heracles or Alexander the Fourth comes of age, and that happens in these two turns. Heracles becomes of age here, Alexander the Fourth here, and you control them. If you have the most combined legitimacy and victory points, you win the game. If you do not, you murder him. If the current heir who's being raised up is not available, is not controlled by anyone, then automatically the person with the most legitimacy and victory points wins on that turn. Now, if the game goes all 5 turns, legitimacy is no longer important. Victory's just on victory points. Whoever has the most wins at the end of the turn. And there's ties there for control of Macedonia, control of total number of Macedonian combat units, etc. Legitimacy is marked by this idea of, there are a number of factors that influence it. For example, controlling the royal heir is worth, or a royal heir, is worth some legitimacy. Some people, for example, Blue has more legitimacy than anyone else. Why is that? Well, he's got the title Strategos of Europe, which, unfortunately, a little counter doesn't tell you how you get that. He starts with it. I believe that comes from controlling Macedonia. If you control Macedonia, you just have that. Which makes Macedonia desirable to everyone, right? You can also get legitimacy points off of burying Alexander effectively. If you get some of these other counters from Tyche cards, they can take away from it. Everybody has 3 because they're considered champions. They stop being champions if they do something bad. Bad in this case means attacking someone who's a champion, except if they are considered the usurper. Now, the usurper is handled at the label the usurper phase, which is towards the beginning of the game. Whoever has the most victory points gets it. Well, that's yellow. That means everyone can attack yellow without any problem. That sucks for yellow, right? But attacking is kind of a tricky term because black, for example, wants to go bury the body. Well, he can walk up to about here without a problem, but now he's got difficulty. He can go through these neutral spaces, no problem there. But then he has to kind of swerve around and get himself back into black territory. And now things are ugly because getting to Macedonia, he's going to perhaps have to fight his way through. If he does that, he may lose the ability of being a champion and lose those 3 points. As well, it means that anyone can attack him without suffering at all. The only way you can get, if you lose champion and become a successor, the only way you can become a champion again is to get your victory points down to 0. Then you're considered no longer a threat or something, and you're given this special bonus there. Combat itself is handled on this battle chart. You get a combination of your army's strength points plus a number of local troops. If you control the space that you're in, you get 1. If you control the entire area you're in, you get 2 more. And both players could get local troops added to your strength. That determines which column you're going to roll on. Then you roll 2 dice. Your dice can't be lower then your leadership value, which I think is that yellow boxed one. Yeah, that's your battle rating. The other number is your initiative rating, which is used for intercepts, for avoiding battle, and supposedly for movement. Yes. For movement, you roll a die, and this is the chart, but there's a basic algorithm behind it, which is roll one die and use that result for your generals. Generals with an initiative less than that die roll get 4. Yeah, so it's basically a break point. But anyway, your battle number determines whether or not you win or lose the battle. If you win the battle, you might take a loss. If you lose the battle, you lose everything, sort of. Your mercenaries are gone, but your regular Macedonian forces take an attrition roll and then go in the dispersed box, so you can rebuild them for the next turn. That makes them much, much sturdier. But it's a very, very different combat system than I've seen in other games. The other charts, a lot of pieces of information here. Not much of it that I really need to explain at this point. So I'm going to let this one go and send it up to you. Again, it's first thoughts, not really a great summary of the rules. You'll see more as we play. I'll probably try to jump in and show what's going on. And I got to figure out the boats.